going on, Dallas Mavericks fans? We are back. I took a little time off, but again, I am back and we're about to get these things rolling. Obviously, the Dallas Mavericks now sitting in the 5th seed and who have also solidified no worse than the 5th seed going into the postseason. Obviously, going to be another matchup against the LA Clippers, who we're seeing now for the 3rd time in Luka Doncic's career. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Right now, we're going to talk about where the Dallas Mavericks are. They're talking about a 50-30 team right now with 2 games left in the season. Tonight against the Detroit Pistons, and the last game going to be against the Oklahoma City Thunder. We'll see where exactly the Oklahoma City Thunder are when it comes to playing meaningful games, whether it's seeding or anything like that. But for right now, the Dallas Mavericks, we're looking at this team in a different light, because in 10 games right now, in the last 10 games, the Dallas Mavericks are 9-1. And the last game, beating the Miami Heat. Once again, you're having Kyrie Irving, you're having Luka Doncic. They're spearheading this thing, they're leading it. But you throw in guys, additions like PJ Washington, who is going to be a vital key to the, I guess you want to say, any postseason success the Dallas Mavericks are going to have. Because when you go into the postseason, obviously you're going to say have different opponents, because one thing you're talking about is going to be different from what you're used to in the regular season. When you're playing a team, and even whether it's a back-to-back, you have a couple teams that you're playing, but at the end of the day, they also may have their eyes focused on their next different opponent. But when it comes to the postseason, we're talking about one matchup for at least a minimum of 4 games. So we're talking about adjustments are going to be made. Teams are going to be watching film, seeing what your real true weaknesses are. And PJ Washington is going to be a guy I'm going to be counting on to knock down some of these open jumpers. We're talking about specifically these corner threes, who we've seen him get a little bit better. He has a 32-point performance not too far away, not too far in the past. And we're talking about a guy. And PJ Washington, what he brings to this team more so than just what he could potentially bring on offense is obviously he's been a defensive captain for this team. And I'm talking about just the energy and the effort that he plays with. And that, to me, that's kind of been the trickle-down effect when you're watching a guy like Derrick Jones Jr., who is also thrown into the mix of the starting lineup. And then obviously Daniel Gafford, who has made a vital key to this team. We're talking about, I believe he's now made his last 22 shots or something like that. And before then, we're talking about just the streaks that he's on. I believe well over 70%. Leading the league in field goal percentages right now, but you're playing with Luka Doncic. You're playing with Kyrie Irving. They're able to set up easy buckets for you. Obviously, when we're not having Derek Lively right now, who obviously we do know, again, is not going to be playing in these last couple games of the season. Hopefully, we're going to be able to get him healthy back for the postseason, because that two-headed monster that Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively is going to be completely important, because that's what kind of allows the Dallas Mavericks to get out to these big leads. We see when you're watching teams and they're not having the ability to pretty much get any time off, you're looking at Daniel Gafford, just the defensive presence that he brings, and Derek Lively. I feel like Derek Lively, if you're watching I guess you want to say the intensity and the aggression that he's played with since Daniel Gafford has joined that starting lineup, I guess you want to say more solely being the starting center for the team right now. You've seen Derek Lively, to me, I feel like attack the boards even harder. You're watching him when it comes to blocking shots and just forcing some contested shots. Daniel Gafford has just been a godsend for this team, because one thing we could not have ever asked for is obviously just something, I guess you could say what we have been asking for is just to get better from the standpoint of the center position. We obviously know we've been dealing with Dwight Powell being the starter, and Dwight Powell's a great guy at the end of the day, a community guy, a great teammate by all accounts. But at the end of the day, that's not a guy you can go into the postseason with and say, Luka Doncic, go win me, I guess you want to see win me series after series after series and try to get to an NBA Finals. But now the Dallas Mavericks have a front court that is going to be very important going forward, because now what you're going to say is, who are going to be those other guys that we're going to be able to say are going to be contributors on the offensive end? Because we know defensively, the Dallas Mavericks, I believe, have the number one defense, since the All-Star break, or since January, I believe it is, since something like that, since the trade, took place. So who are going to be some of these other guys that we're going to be able to count on going into the postseason? In offensive end, I'm going to say, obviously, Tim Hardaway Jr. is a guy that can be very streaky. And when you're talking about what Tim Hardaway Jr. is, to me, he's going to be an X factor in certain situations. Like I said earlier on, we're talking about early on in the season, especially Tim Hardaway Jr. was a 6th man of the year. And to me, I feel like he was the leader for a big chunk of this season. Obviously, we're dealing with some injuries. Kyrie Irving, who's going to be missing I believe 20 to something games, 20 plus games this year. year, and I believe he's going to be out tonight, which I'm completely okay with because I think the report came out yesterday. And I want to say it's a rest type situation because we're looking at Kyrie Irving has been a dog for this team. We're talking about where this is just the leadership that he's helped bring. Luka Doncic is going to be able to feed off of that because we don't even have to talk about just the big shots, but especially the biggest shot in the NBA Finals. We saw Kyrie Irving knock down to help the Cleveland Cavaliers bring their first championship to that city. This is going to be very exciting to watch going forward, and we're going to be able to see who exactly can you add into the mix and see who else can just be some key contributors going forward. Obviously, we could talk about what Jason Kidd has been for this team. I guess you want to say in the last 3 seasons, we're talking about 250-win seasons in the last 3 years. Last year, obviously, 38 wins, but it was a season of disarray. Some injuries. We're talking about even the Kyrie Irving trade. I think I said it myself last year. After that trade was made for Kyrie Irving from the Brooklyn Nets, this was more so for the future. It wasn't for last year. You were trying to pretty much see if you guys could work any magic with the Luka Doncic and the Kyrie Irving connection. But the more important thing was going to be this season and the next seasons going forward. And we have seen just that leadership that Kyrie Irving's brought. Obviously, you do know the narrative for Kyrie Irving is that he's a troublemaker, regardless of whether it's intentional, whatever it is. Kyrie Irving is going to be a guy that's going to break apart your locker room at some point. He's not going to help your team when it comes to just morale. But we've seen that could not be further from the truth. These guys love playing with Kyrie Irving. These guys love playing with Luka Doncic. These guys love playing with just some of these other dogs you add in, like I said, a PJ Washington, because PJ Washington, again, if you're asking what he's brought, is just that defensive prowess and the energy, and you cannot coach that. But if you're going to talk about Jason Kidd, like I said, in the last 3 seasons, we have 250-win seasons. So I'm going to say it now. Obviously, we can kind of maybe expect Jason Kidd to be getting some kind of extension going forward. I believe to me, it's also going to see what this team can do during the postseason. But a guy like Jason Kidd, I've been very critical of, especially early on in the season, because I feel like throughout the few years that he's been here as the head coach, some of the biggest issues are just him being stubborn at certain points. I feel like he kind of sticks with guys that when he should maybe give some of these younger guys an opportunity, whether it's a Tim Hardaway Jr. when he's going through his cold streaks, or whether it's a guy like Maxi Kleber. To me, just limiting his opportunities, because we have seen Maxi Kleber, especially, I'll be the first one right now to be giving him a lot of credit for just the way that he has played, because what is now showing itself is that the Dallas Mavericks have just actually built a solid rotation, and a very deep rotation, I might add. We're talking about maybe 10 players deep. You can go from Luka Doncic, go from the starting lineup. Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, obviously Derrick Jones Jr., who did bust his shoulder up in that Miami Heat game, so we'll have to see exactly what goes on with him over the next, I guess you want to say, in the next couple days, few days. But obviously, it's going to be very important because we are going to be able to get that week off of rest, essentially, because the play-in tournament, which the Dallas Mavericks, and especially as Mavericks fans, we should be very happy that we're not going to have that stress of worrying about, is our team going to be able to get through one of these play-in games? Because we do know the play-in games can be very tricky themselves, whether it's a couple bad calls from referees or officials or whatever it is, or a fluky injury, or just having a bad shooting night. You don't want to have to rely on one game to be able to help you actually get into the playoffs. So the Dallas Mavericks can do no worse than the 5 seed, and potentially, it's a long shot to me, in my opinion, because the LA Clippers, who play tonight also, as well as the Dallas Mavericks, who do play the Detroit Pistons tonight at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, the LA Clippers will be facing off against the Utah Jazz, and let's be clear. The LA Clippers, I feel like, have shown themselves to have some chinks in their armor, whether it's Kawhi Leonard being a little banged up, or you're looking at a guy like Russell Westbrook, who's been a little banged up this year, James Harden missing a little time, Paul George kind of here and there, but also at the same time, we do know they still have some very capable postseason players. So we'll see how exactly that goes. I'm still holding out some hope that the Dallas Mavericks could potentially move up to get a 4th seed, depending on if all the cards fall into the right place, because nothing is going to be better than having any potential home court advantage in the playoffs. I don't care if it's for one series, a couple series, whatever it is. You want to be able to kind of get that home court advantage if you can. But I will say at the same time, I don't really worry about what the Dallas Mavericks can do overall on the road, because this team has shown itself to be tough and to be, I guess you want to be able to handle adversity, because we have had lots of injuries. We're talking about Kyrie Irving this year, who's missed 22 plus games, I believe, and is going to be adding another one. And I don't see him playing playing in these next couple games for the remainder of the season, the last 2 games of this season. So you're talking about a guy like Kyrie Irving missing 20+ games. Dereck Lively, who's missed 20+ games this year. You're talking about Dante Exum, who's missed a lot of times. These are key players to the Dallas Mavericks, whether it's role players or just guys in the starting lineup. We've had some injuries. Tim Hardaway Jr., who was kind of that leading 6th man of the year candidate early on in the season, who has now, I will give him also a lot of credit, who has taken the opportunities and to me fit into the offense. Well, sometimes what you can say, Tim Hardaway Jr., if he's knocking down the shots, is beautiful to see because he will get hot and he's the microwave shooter. It doesn't matter if you have 2 guys in his face, 2 hands in his face. When Tim Hardaway Jr. is knocking down his shots, it's game over because he's the one that helps it kind of spread those big leads out. But Tim Hardaway Jr., what he's gotten better at, because I was going to say the same thing. Tim Hardaway Jr., when those shots are not falling, sometimes you can see him force it, and sometimes it feels like he's going to help shoot us out of games sometimes. What Tim Hardaway Jr. has found himself to do, and I'm very happy about it, is that he's fit himself into the offense, whether it's just spotting up or just passing the ball in certain positions, and I'm going to say in the right opportunities. Tim Hardaway Jr., like I said, this team, I'm going to say, is going to be very deep going into the postseason. It's going to be very interesting to see who exactly kind of works their way into getting these big playoff minutes. Josh Green, who just returned in this last game against the Miami Heat as well, is going to be another player to keep an eye on because, again, you're talking about just the defensive pressure that a guy like P.J. Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. are bringing on the perimeter. And also, they have the versatility and the length to sometimes help in a small ball, 3, 4, 5 positions, I guess you want to say, at certain points. A guy like Josh Green could find himself being very vital to just some of the defensive pressure on the perimeter for the Dallas Mavericks going into the postseason. And when you talk about the L.A. Clippers, obviously, you're going to have guys out there that can get their own shots if they're healthy. So we're going to need all the pressure we can get. We're going to need Luka and Kyrie to be Luka and Kyrie, and I feel like they're going to be just that going forward. What I'm going to say now is the Dallas Mavericks facing off against the Detroit Pistons, the lowly Detroit Pistons tonight. But at the end of the day, the NBA is a game of can you get it done that specific night? Any team can beat anybody. The difference between a good team, I always say, the difference between a good team and a bad team is the good teams can do it consistently. The bad teams can catch you on any given night, but they are usually just the teams that are not be able to do the same things consistently game in and game out. So the Dallas Mavericks are going to find themselves in the mix. But what do you guys think about the Dallas Mavericks going forward? Who are some of the key players you're going to be looking at to keep an eye on going into the postseason? Who do you think are going to be the major contributors? Obviously, we do know when you're looking at Luka Doncic, who to me averaging 33 right now, I believe 33.2 points per game, something like that around there, 33 points, about 9 rebounds, 9 assists. This is a guy I felt should be very much so in the mix for winning the MVP this year, but it seems like the narratives have already been stacked against him. We're talking about a lot of this stuff is we're not even getting, I believe, in the last 18 games, we were 16-2 or something like that, something around there. We're looking at, I believe, Daniel Gafford is 17-1 in the starting lineup. The Dallas Mavericks are 17-1 with Daniel Gafford in the starting lineup. So these are going to be some things to keep an eye on. And I feel like Luka Doncic has pretty much helped carry, especially some of those early injuries I'm talking about, to a guy like Kyrie Irving. That seems to not be given any context. And you're seeing the Dallas Mavericks now move their way up. But it seemed like a lot of these voters pretty much have already made their minds up. And I believe Nikola Jokic is going to get his 3rd MVP in 4 years. So to me, that's going to just say one of these things is going to be very interesting to see as the years continue to go on. If Luka Doncic is not going to get MVP this year, when exactly could he get it? Because it seems like the cards are always stacked against him. And I know for sure that Luka Doncic himself is going to say the same thing as a guy like Kyrie Irving is going to say. The biggest goal for this team is winning a championship. And nothing's going to be sweeter than a guy like Luka Doncic holding up that finals MVP trophy if we're able to make something actually happen during this postseason run. So we'll see how exactly that goes. But what do you guys think about the Luka Doncic MVP consideration? What do you think about this whole race? Do you feel like he should be the leader of it? And again, I try to be as non-biased as possible, but at the same time, the context when we're watching the Dallas Mavericks as Mavericks fans, we're seeing everything up close and personal. We're seeing I guess you want to say the struggle sometimes this team, I guess you want to say did have early on in this season, and some of the things that Luka Doncic was able to kind of cover up a little bit. I don't feel like he's getting the credit that he deserves. But at the end of the day, like I said, Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic, the rest of this team overall, they're looking for the bigger goal, and that's talking about championship success. If the Dallas Mavericks can find themselves getting out to a hot start in this postseason run against the LA Clippers, whether it's the Dallas Mavericks in the 4th seed or the 5th seed, I want to see just how far we can push this thing, how far we can take it. What do you guys think about the Dallas Mavericks going forward? What do you think about the combination of Derek Lively? What do you think of? Do you think he's going to be back and healthy for this first round series against the LA Clippers? But what do you think about that combination of Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively? Who do you feel exactly should be the starter? Because I'm going to say, obviously, to me, it's certain situations. It depends. If we're talking about quicker teams, maybe potentially you can get Derek Lively a little bit more time. But I feel like I guess you want to say the opportunity has presented itself that you don't really have to worry about things like that, because at the end of the day, when you're talking about two guys that can get the job done and the other team, the opposing team, does not ever get a break. You're either going to have Derek Lively, you're going to have Daniel Gafford, excuse me, on the court at opposite times. You're never going to get a break when it comes to rim protection. And at the same time, we're looking at Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving. They're going to continue to get those guys the ball and some easy buckets. And we do know, again, these are playoff performers. Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, these are guys that have shown themselves to be playoff performers. I'm excited. I'm excited to see what exactly PJ Washington can bring during this postseason run, because we do know with the Charlotte Hornets, I believe they played in the play-in, was it a couple years ago, a year or so ago. PJ Washington, this is a guy who's now going to be able to see himself be a key role player. And at the end of the day, he's the kind of guy, I'm going to say, you don't keep your eyes on the stat sheet sometimes. You want to watch what he's actually doing in the games. And he's giving that pressure. So it's going to be very interesting to see who exactly is a guy like PJ Washington going to be guarding in this first round series against the Clippers. Is it going to be one of those guys? Is it going to be Kawhi Leonard if Kawhi Leonard is able to come back early on in the series? Is it going to be Paul George? Is it going to be a James Harden? We'll see exactly how it goes. But I'm excited for the Dallas Mavericks going forward. In the last 10 games, the Dallas Mavericks are sitting with a 9-1 record. This team is just starting to click at the right time, at the perfect time. And I'm going to say, when we're talking about a deep playoff rotation, whether it's going from the starting lineup, you're looking at Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, obviously, Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford. Then you talk about who's coming off the bench in certain situations. You're looking at now adding Derek Lively. You're looking at Tim Hardaway Jr. You're looking at Dante Exum, Josh Green, who I believe can be a contributor. You do know Maxi Kleber's still going to get his opportunities here and there when they call for it. That's about 10 deep, and we could possibly add somebody else in the mix depending on what the game calls for. So the Dallas Mavericks are just a very capable team, and it's funny now you're starting to see national media want to give them a little bit more love as a team overall. Eyes are starting to open. You still have the detractors, the haters, the guys that are just saying, oh, what have the Dallas Mavericks done? Who have they really beat? I don't even want to get into what we're talking about, what talk television is, sports debate shows are nowadays, from the Keyshawn Johnsons, from the Stephen A. Smiths, the guys that you can tell are not actually paying attention to games. But you're looking at the Tim Leggers, you're looking at guys like Paul Pierce, again, who has his crazy takes here and there, but you're starting to see some of these other guys actually being able to give the Dallas Mavericks some love. And like a Tim Legler, a guy who pretty much hopped on the Dallas Mavericks train fairly early. We're talking about post-trade deadline, a guy that kind of saw what the potential of this team could be if we could actually just get everybody to fit into their role and figure out what exactly they're going to be adding to this team. So the Dallas Mavericks, again, sitting at 50-30, the 5th seed right now, potentially long shot, like I said, to move up to the 4th seed, but it's still an opportunity to get there. So we'll see where exactly the Dallas Mavericks are going to go. Go ahead and let me know down below in the comment section. What do you think about the Dallas Mavericks going to the postseason? Like I said, who are going to be some of the key contributors? How do you feel about the Derek Lively and the Daniel Gafford combination down low under the rim, protecting the rim? And we're talking about just easy buckets for these guys. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like Tim Hardaway Jr. is going to be a guy that really contributes? I could potentially see a Jaden Hardy being a guy who kind of finds himself finding a couple nice solid games during this postseason run if we're able to actually make some magic start to happen. So I appreciate you guys for all the support. Again, we are right back. I took a little break, but I will be completely rolling out these videos going forward. Obviously, with the postseason going around, it's going to be a very exciting time around this city and just around, if you're a Dallas Mavericks fan anywhere, wherever it is, it's a very exciting time for this team and for this franchise and for this fan base overall. So I appreciate you guys for all the support. Go ahead, like, comment, subscribe, and share. You guys are amazing. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day.